three names in particular, I'm just kind of struggling. I know it's only 2 starts, so whatever. Like, it's a really long season. But Mitch Keller, another rough outing. This one at the Nationals, 5 1/3 innings, 8 hits, 5 runs allowed, 4 of them earned, had 5 strikeouts, gave up some hard contact in this one, 10 hard hits. He's given up 18 hard hits total over his first 2 starts. And I don't know, like, I don't put too much stock in the pitch mix because he's always tinkering. He's always changing his pitch mix from start to start. The fastball velocity is down just over 1 mile per hour in each of his first 2 outings. What have you guys seen from Mitch Keller here, first 2 starts?
So I think the audience probably assumes that Scott's going to be the most optimistic about him. But I want to take a chance to say that the one thing you can be confident of with Mitch Keller is when things are going wrong for him, he will not remain that pitcher. That is the one thing we've seen consistently from Mitch Keller really over the past 3 seasons is he puts a lot of work into figuring out what's working and what isn't for him and adjusting his approach. And that's all to say that I don't think Mitch Keller's ever going to be the ace he looked like in the first half of last season again, but I generally think it will pay off to be optimistic about him when things are going poorly, because I think he will tinker until he figures something out. And that is a reason to buy when the price is low, and it's a reason to certainly not drop him right now.
Mm-hmm.
No, definitely not drop.
Yeah, I think he has better starts ahead for sure. And he is a tinkerer, as Chris points out, and that's part of the reason why he's really difficult to pin down. But if I had to, if there was one site you could stat for Mitch Keller coming into the season that I would say, yeah, I don't feel great about it, it was the swinging strike rate. Mm-hmm. And the swinging strike rate has been good through 2 starts. So I don't know. I think after 2 starts like this, where it's not like he gave up 8 runs in 2 innings, like, it's not like he had a start like George Kirby just had. I don't see any reason to change the thinking on Keller. Whatever your opinion was coming in, maybe you hated him, maybe you think he stinks. Okay, well, he's obviously hasn't given you reason to change your opinion. But if you thought he was good, I don't think he's giving you reason to change your opinion either.
Do you start him next week, 2-start week against the Tigers and at the Phillies?
In points leagues, for sure.
Yeah.
And Roto, I'd weigh my options. I wouldn't be a flat no.
I'd start him ahead of like the Nestor Cortez 2-star week we talked about earlier.
You would, even with how good the matchups are. Mm-hmm. Okay, then I guess I have to start him too.
Yeah, I mean, just because the Tigers are a pretty good matchup too. I know the second one,
Philly's not so much.
Philly's not so much. Yeah. That's a tough one, but
yeah.
Let's talk about Carlos Rodon, who was okay at the D-backs. 5 1/3 innings, 7 hits, 2 runs allowed, only 3 strikeouts, gave up 2 home runs in the start, only 7 swinging strikes, 7 hard hits allowed, faded the slider a little bit in this one, threw more four-seam fastballs. He also mixed in 5 changeups and 4 curveballs. It's not really something we see Carlos Rodon do often. The velocity looks fine. Something just seems off. I don't know how to quantify it, but just watching him, he's not as sharp. He's not as electric as he was 2 years ago with the Giants. And everyone will say, well, that's obvious, Frank. He's not, putting up these massive stats. I get that. But I like just watching him. It's just something's missing. Something's not there for Carlos Rodon right now.
The whiffs, for one thing.
I don't know what it is. Like, what do you guys put into the pitch mix too? Like, do you think it's a lack of confidence in the slider, or do you maybe look glass half full and say, "Oh, trying new things, this might work"? I don't know.
Something I noted in spring training when Carlos Rodon was working on this cutter. It's something that a lot of pitchers have struggled with when they try to introduce a cutter, is because a cutter is kind of halfway between a fastball and a slider. What some pitchers have happen is the 3 pitches tend to just blur together, or the cutter ends up kind of kneecapping the effectiveness of one of the pitches. And I worry that might be what's happening with the slider in particular, which is the velocity on that is up. It's still way below the cutter, but it's up more than the rest of his pitches. It's up 1.4 miles per hour. And he's getting less sweep and less vertical break with the slider. which is to say it is behaving a little bit more like a cutter. There's still very distinct pitches. 3 more inches of horizontal break, 17 more inches of vertical break with the slider. They are different pitches, but I do worry that the slider just isn't the same pitch right now that it has been. And that's a real problem for Carlos Rodon because he needs his fastball to be incredibly effective. And so far it hasn't been. And he needs his slider to be incredibly effective. And he only had 2 whiffs with it. So I think this is a legitimate concern for Carlos Rodon that maybe someone smarter than me can look into and confirm or disprove my hypothesis. But that is my working theory on Carlos Rodon. And I think the lack of effectiveness and lack of trust in the slider is a problem given how much he has to rely on that pitch.
I think that's a fine conspiracy, hypothesis, whatever you want to call it. I kind of just want to see him live and die by his bread and butter.
Yeah.
Just throw your 4-seam and your slider and let's see what happens, right? Like now that you're healthy and the velocity is there, which, wasn't healthy last year, was not hitting his spots, just go with what works and let's see if that actually you could be productive doing that. And I don't know if we could just say that about Carlos Rodon right now. Would you guys start him next week against the Miami Marlins 1 start?
Yes.
My confidence in Rodon is very low. And if I had a 2-start option to start over him, I would prefer to do that. But if not, then I think you could justify starting him against the Marlins for sure.
Last name on this list, I wanted to take a closer look at Cristian Javier. An uneven start against the Blue Jays. 5 shutout innings, only 1 hit. That's great. 5 walks to 3 strikeouts. He had 10 swinging strikes on 97 pitches. This is 2 starts in a row now. He's gone with this new approach, using the fastball, changeup, and slider almost evenly on all 3 pitches, like close to 30 to 35% on each of those 3 pitches. And the changeup was his best pitch here on Wednesday. He had 6 whiffs, a 46% whiff rate. I think it gives Javier another lifeline when the fastball and the slider are not working. Last year, we saw there were many times where one or even both of those pitches were off, and it just everything crumbled for Cristian Javier. So he has that extra lifeline. It's just, I think the production is going to look different. It's going to be differently distributed for Javier than maybe we've seen in years past when he was good, obviously.
Yeah, I have my concerns here. It's kind of, and I was more optimistic about Javier than I think most people were coming into the year, but it's kind of, I'm getting kind of that Graham Ashcraft vibe from last year where he gets off to a good start and I should be taking a victory lap, but it's just not the way it should be. His changeup has been his best swing and miss pitch each of the first 2 starts. So the fastball and slider don't appear to be working. And I'm not sure, since the overall whiff rate is low for Cristian Javier, I'm not sure that changeup is enough to overcome a lack of effectiveness from what were his only 2 pitches before then. The results have been good, but I'm a little worried. I might be willing to attach the sell high label to Cristian Javier, which isn't to say dump him, but might be worth exploring.
If you could turn Cristian Javier into Bailey Ober right now, you try and make that happen?
I would do it.
Yeah, I'd do that.